Welcome to another edition of Marriage Clinic Live. How are you today? I remain your host, Marlai Hano Puti. Thank you so much for always joining us on another edition of Marriage Clinic Live. So today we have a very special guest in the house who will be enlightening us on this topic that we have been trying to look at for some time now, and she's very well experienced when it comes to topics like this or issues of discussion like this, and it's a privilege for us to have today on Marriage Clinic Live the wife of the senior advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Femi Falana, in the person of Funmi Falana, and she is a human rights activist. She is a legal practitioner and director of Women's Empowerment and Legal Aid. It's a privilege to have her join us today on Marriage Clinic Live. Welcome, ma. Welcome to Marriage Clinic Live.
Thank you. I'm glad to be with you.
Okay, ma. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. So, ma, as a human rights activist, I want you to enlighten us on marriage through the eyes of the law, because before now, or even now, many people believe that, marriage, should only be seen through the eyes of God because He is the one that instituted marriage. But we all know that marriage is being done within the confines of a state or under a law where they reside. So understanding marriage through the eyes of the law, as well as it relates to the law of Nigeria, especially.
There are three types of marriages. Marriage under the Act, which is the one we call the legal marriage. There's a customary marriage or the traditional marriage, and of course there's a Muslim marriage. But under the law, all these three are marriages recognized under the law. We say the one under the Act is the legal marriage, but the others are also recognized under the law. So there are three types of marriages under the law. The one that is called the church marriage, you call it, or the one you do in the registry is the marriage under the Act, and that is the one that is one man, one wife marriage. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma, but we can't see you again. We can only hear your voice, but we can't see you.
Oh, I don't know why you can't see me.
Okay, we can see you now. Yes, okay. We can see you now.
The one we always encourage people to go into, because there are so many benefits attached to it, is the marriage under the Act. Now, under the marriage under the Act, there are some legal rights that accrue onto the wife and to the husband, vice versa. For example, when you are in a marriage under the Act, you cannot contact any other marriage. Whichever one you contact after the one that is under the Act is null and void under the law. So you can only have one wife or one husband under this type of marriage. And that is why I say this is the one many people call legal marriage. Howbeit, the two others are also legal, but they are not under the Marriage Act. Now, another very important right under the marriage under the Act is that a wife under this marriage cannot be found to have stolen the property of the husband. I don't know if that makes sense. You cannot be prosecuted for stealing or for taking anything that belongs to your wife or to your husband, as long as you are in the same you are in that relationship under the Act. It is assumed that yours is his own and his property is is as long as you are both living.
Mm.
Now, after death, a woman that contracts marriage under the act, if the husband dies intestate, that is dying without will, the woman is entitled to 1/3 of the property of the man automatically. It is the remaining 2/3 the children of the man will now have to share. But in the other two types of marriages, these are not available to them. This type of right is not applicable onto the other two types of marriages. For example, the customary marriage allows you to marry. If you marry Yoruba customary marriage, I think you can marry as many as you can. If it is the Muslim marriage, you can marry as many as 4. But under the marriage under the act, you can only marry 1. So we usually act a woman going into marriage. And what happens in this part of the world, we always do what we call double-decker marriage. They are not just satisfied with one form of marriage. We saw that some will contract the traditional marriage, the one we call engagement in this part of the world. It is the real traditional marriage. And they go ahead to contract, to top it up with a legal marriage. They either go to church or some will decide to go to the registry. Of course, this is still okay under the law. The only implication is that you have contracted a double-decker marriage. That is 2 types of marriages combined together. Yes.
And does the law accept this, that we can do 2?
Oh yes, the law accepts this. It is wonderful. Like I said, the only condition that invalidates the marriage under the act is if you go ahead and contract another marriage after it. But whatever happens before it, if it is a customary marriage, it remains valid and it is recognized under the law.
So, some people do this customary or traditional marriage, and after that, they don't do any other marriage again, or probably once they do this traditional, they just go to church for blessing, pastor's blessing. So in this case, would we say they are still compelled under the law to stick to one man and
no, they are not. No, they are not. As a matter of fact, the legal marriage is the one that gives them the right to one man, one wife. If the type of marriage you have contracted is the traditional or the customary marriage, you can have many wives under that law, under the customary marriage, and there is no law that inhibits you from so doing. But if it is the marriage under this, then you cannot and you must not have any other wife or any other marriage after the one you've gotten. And so that is why, for security purposes, we usually advise that a woman should prefer the marriage under the act, which gives her more security. And of course, it gives the man more security as well, depending on the way you look at it. But if it is a customary marriage, you are at liberty to marry as many wives as you can marry, as many wives as your custom permits you to do.
Okay, ma. So, let's look at the issue of married women's rights. As a human rights activist, I believe that that as a married woman, women should also have a right in their marriage, because some men believe that, as a woman, you are just supposed to be there as a puppet, to be kept in the house. You don't have a say in what is going on in the marriage. You are just there, as a slave, so
let
to
me come in there. Let me come in there. Whatever type of marriage that through or you undergo, it is important to let you know that the provision of the Constitution, which is very sacrosanct, is superior to any other rules of the law. And the provision of the Constitution provides that no one shall be discriminated against on the basis of sex. So the fact that wife or a woman in the house should not make you a lesser to the man of the house. In other words, you of the man, the right the man has, it's also a very crucial to you. A man and a woman are construed to be equal in the eyes of the law, especially the Constitution and all international human rights instruments that are applicable in Nigeria. So either it is a customary law, a marriage or marriage under the Act, the law, especially the Constitution, prescribes that you must be treated equally with your male counterparts. So the fact that a woman should be seen as a chattel, which is the implication of some of our customs, especially in the eastern part of Nigeria and the southwestern part of Nigeria, that most women are seen as chattels and not human beings. Those customs and traditions can no longer withstand the provisions of the Constitution. And it is the law that where the custom or the customary law or the customary belief or the customary practice is inconsistent with the provision of the Constitution, it is null and void. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
Yes, ma'am. So you are saying that the provisions of the law supersedes that of the culture and tradition.
Exactly, that is the point we are making. It supersedes the provisions of the Constitution, supersede any other law, especially the provisions of the customary marriage or customary law.
But ma, we all know that in some customs, so for example, like the eastern part that you mentioned, we know that their customs or their culture and tradition to them is like their God. They believe so much in that, even above the law of the land, and they believe that whatever they are going to do within the confines of marriage must be based on their culture. So for people,
I agree with you. As a matter of fact, the women there are so docile to the extent that they don't want to. The women from the southeastern part, they are usually not willing to challenge the custom. For example, a woman cannot inherit the property of her father upon the death of the man, except the man decides to give or to write a will. Now, there was a lawyer for that matter who was speaking with me sometimes, and I said, challenge this provision. He said, no, it is our custom. I am afraid to challenge it. So most of the time we discover that it is fear of what will the people say. These customs have been around us for long. They don't want to change. And the fear of being unable to speak out or to challenge this provision or to even ask for your rights that has continued to encourage such unconstitutional practices.
So, ma, when you were speaking earlier, you talked about marriage under the Act, and that only restricts us to marrying just one wife and one husband.
Yes.
But in today's reality, we notice that some people do abandonment. So it's not as if they divorced the wife or the husband they married, but they just walk out of the marriage, and you don't just see them again, and they abandon maybe the wife and the children, or the woman who abandoned the husband with the children and she goes off on her own, the man goes off on his own. But later on, you will find out that, oh, they've gone to settle down again with someone else. Is there any provision under the law to address that?
This act you just described now is an act of domestic violence. And there are many laws against domestic violence in Nigeria. As a matter of fact, each state has their law that specifies provisions that punish, makes domestic violence a criminal act. For example, in Lagos State, we have the law against domestic violence. In, I think, Ondo, Ekiti, some southwestern states, Ogun too, and in Cross River and Calabar, about 14 states have these laws prescribing punishment for such acts of domestic violence. In fact, for example, there is a section, I think section 432 of the criminal law of Lagos State punishes a man that impregnates a woman and abandons her. It is a criminal offense to impregnate a woman and abandon her without taking responsibility. And so if a man walks out of the marriage and the woman decides to go to court and challenge it, the law compels the man to come back and pay for maintenance, and of course to be responsible for the maintenance of the child or children, whichever the case may be, as well as the wife. The law will compel him to so do. But unfortunately, most women do not speak out, and it is very sad. And that is why men get away with such atrocities.
So, Matt, that takes us also to the issue of infidelity in marriage. So these days you hear some women crying, oh, my husband is cheating on me, even though he married me under the act at home, but he's still busy carrying different women, cheating and all of that. And they look helpless, incapacitated in the marriage. Is there any provision under the law that restricts the man from doing such, or restrict the woman from saying, oh, I want to still be going after different men, despite the fact that she's married to a man?
Yes. Number one of the reasons that you can profile in court for divorce is adultery. If you can cite him for adultery, and you can also prove adultery against him, and you want the solution of the marriage, the law will allow you to so do. Then again, you can profile issues of adultery as a form of domestic violence against you. And if you can prove that in court, the law will so hold, and the law will make some what we call preservation orders to restrain the man from so doing. So there are ways that you can control, or there are ways that you can challenge acts of infidelity if you are willing to do so. But unfortunately, you must be able to catch him red-handed, which is usually very difficult, especially for those ones that are very, very smart at it. But if you are able to catch him red-handed, then there are some provisions of the laws that protect you.
Then, ma, grounds for dissolution, like you mentioned, that one of them is adultery. Today, we see some women, just saying, oh, you know what, I'm going to walk out of the marriage, I'm going to divorce, on so many flimsy grounds. Some will say, oh, he can't provide. Some will say, oh, he's not listening to me. Oh, he's paying more attention to his mother-in-law challenges and things like that. So are those also part of the grounds that
the issues of adultery, number one, those are issues that can be grounds for dissolution of marriage. Adultery, then intolerable acts like domestic violence is also another condition, another reason that you can ask for divorce. So if you've beaten domestic violence, wife battery, or intolerable acts like non-provision of socioeconomic needs in the house, or non-provision of conjugal rights, all these are conditions that can be taken for divorce.
Then, ma, so are there mediation avenues as well for
Yes.
couples.
As a matter of fact, before a marriage is dissolved in court, when you file a case in court, the law provides that at least some time must be given to the two of them, the possibility of reconciliation. It's what we call compulsory conference. The law, the two parties, and of course their lawyers, to hold conferences and see how they could resolve and reconcile them. Again, if they are unable to reconcile them, the law also to find a way they can attend to the maintenance of the children of the marriage, such that the children of the marriage is not affected by dissolution, because the matrimonial contract provides that the interest of the marriage of the interest of the children of the marriage shall be more important than anything to the court. So there must be a conference to see how to reconcile them before the court will finally go to dissolve the marriage.
Thank you, ma, for that. And that takes us to the question of who owns the children, or who has the legal right to the children in marriage, in a
both
case
parties
of
have the legal rights, and as a matter of fact, equal rights. Gone are the days that they say the child belongs to the father. And I've been telling women not to deceive them, to cajole them, that their children belong to their father. It is not correct. This day, the law specifies both parents, both the man and the woman, have equal rights to the children, and they have equal access to the children. And of course, they both have rights to joint custody of the children. It is no longer correct that the home of the child is in the father's home. It is the home of the mother and the home of the father belong to the children today under the present law.
No. So, ma, is emotional abuse recognized under the law? Because we know there
domestic violence is not physical violence. Like I said, domestic violence, we have physical violence, which is wife battery. We also have emotional violence. We have psychological violence. The emotional violence is very rampant when you're nagging, or when you bring another wife or another woman to the house of negative words, or even when you deny the woman conjugal rights, or you deny the man his conjugal rights in the home. It is a form of emotional violence. Then we have psychological violence, where you make the house unhabitable for either of the spouse. It is also an act of it could be emotional, it could be psychological, it could be socioeconomic. Now, if you refuse to provide for your family, it is a form of socioeconomic abuse. If you deny your wife or your husband conjugal rights, it is a form of emotional abuse. If you give your wife or your husband a sense of insecurity in the house with nagging and other things, it is a form of psychological abuse. If you beat your wife or your husband, it is a form of physical abuse.
Ma, under the socio-economic abuse, some people may argue that, we all know what is happening in the country today, that inflation is on the rise, a lot is happening, even the man is struggling to keep up with meeting the demands of the home all alone, all by himself. And they will also argue that, well, after all, the woman too went to school the same way he went to school, that why can't she also see how she can earn, so that both of them can pool resources together to meet their socio-economic needs?
Oh yes, that is, of course, the wife is also expected to work. The wife is not supposed to fold her hands. But the law, we want to recognize the effort of the man, vis-a-vis the earnings of the man, vis-a-vis his source of income. He must be able to provide according to what he can. And of course, the woman, and that is why we always encourage women not to solely depend on the man, to also be economically independent, such that they will be able to help the man or to complement the effort of the man in the house. That is what we call egalitarianism in domestic setting. Egalitarianism is where both the man and the woman put or draw their resources together to be able to make the home function well. This is, of course, this is also acceptable under the law, but it is still expected that a man will provide for the family at least according to what he earns, his income, or what he's able to make at the end of the month or year, or whatever the case may be, his capability.
Okay, Madam, initially you said something about their rights to their assets when the marriage is enacted under the law, that when it's enacted under the law, that the wife cannot accuse the husband of stealing property or her asset, and the husband cannot accuse the wife of stealing.
Oh, yeah.
Because they are now.
Yes, for example, the wife cannot steal a wife of a marriage under the act cannot steal the property of the husband, vice versa. This is because prudentially it is as that the two are one. And of course, biblically, it is said that a man shall leave his father and his mother and will cleave to the wife and they become one. And under the jurisprudence of the law, it is assumed that are one. So it is not possible to accuse a woman of being a thief or stealing the property of the husband. That is the law.
Yes, ma'am. But in reality, we know that there are some spouses that squander or even elope with the assets of their spouse. We've seen cases whereby a husband can go sell the wife's car, the wife can elope with the husband's all the monies in the bank account. So we've seen cases like that. So are we saying so long that happened between a married man and a married woman, the law cannot do anything about it?
Unfortunately, as long as the man continues, it is assumed that the property of the man is that of the wife, except the marriage is under dissolution or is a matter of litigation, and evidences are being brought before the court. And that is why dissolution, when the marriage is going to be dissolved, the court will ask that the properties of the marriage be brought before the court, and the court will partition the properties, divide properties according to they have. So that is to say, it is assumed that the properties belong to the two of them.
Okay, ma. Thank you very much, ma, for answering those questions. So I think two more questions, ma. We call it a day. So I remembered when I was trying to reach you and I spoke with Femi Falana. He said something. He said, "Oh, that when it comes to marriage, that my wife is the one you should be talking to. That because." For his own marriage, that you have been like the strong backbone that made the marriage a success, that if we were to leave it to him alone, that his marriage wouldn't have been a success, but that you made a success out of the marriage. So I said, okay, when I have the opportunity to interview you, I want you to share with us how you were able to hold the marriage and make a success out of it.
Yeah, besides what I must have told you, I'm also a women's rights activist and, of course, a practitioner of marriage and domestic issues. But be that as it may, marriage is like what he told you, I would disagree with him. Marriage is give and take. I cannot
True.
make it work alone. It must have been
Yeah.
the effort of the two of us. But
True.
I don't want to assume him that I made it work. Of course, God
Yeah.
made it.
Bring her.
Yes. While I give, he also has something I give. So marriage is supposed to be give and take. There are areas that you compromise here and there. There are
Yeah.
areas that
Yeah.
you play down the weakness of your partner, and of course
Yeah.
you build up the strength and make. So I want to believe that the effort is not mine alone. He also contributed to it, and of course it is God that has made it.
Possible. Okay, man. So the last question, ma. We know that you were able to raise a son who is multi-talented. I mean, even though he's a lawyer, he's also an actor, he's also a comedian. I mean, he's multi-talented. So can we say that your training or your input into his upbringing help him to become that today, or is something that he just came with from heaven?
I
How
give
will you explain that?
give all the glory to God. Glory to God. Why you ask my children, they will say I'm a disciplinarian. Yes, I of course I am. But there are parents that are disciplinarians and their children still turn out bad. So I want to believe that the God factor is in everything that happens. It is God that
Mm,
has made him successful. And I give all the
mm.
glory to God.
Thank you so much, ma. I would like to
Thank you.
call it a day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Thank
accepting
you
our
very much.
invitation.
Bye bye. Enjoy
My,
your
my
evening.
daddy.
Thank you. It's nice speaking with you.
Yeah, thank
Bye.
you, man. Bye, man. So we have come to the end of today's program. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to have another special guest soon. So please try to follow us. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel if you are yet to subscribe. Give us a like, give us a comment. Let's know what you think about our topics of discussion. Till meet again, I remain your host, Malaya and Oputianaisi.